Hey y'all, good morning and welcome to Daddy's Right Here Live. I'm your host as always, Sabir Aleem. Great day to be alive. Another day above ground is always a bonus. Another opportunity to help somebody else. Man, listen, ain't nothing like it. Ain't nothing like helping somebody else, achieve their goals or to realize some things about a certain situation that can help them grow as a person, because that's what it really always comes down to, personal growth. So today I want to talk about a subject that I know that most of us have encountered at some point in time in our life. Some of us may even be in that situation today where we love somebody, truly love somebody, excuse me, and the relationship just ain't working. We've tried, we worked hard at trying, and even though we've worked hard at trying, it's typical that one thinks that the other tried harder than the other. Right? We kind of do that back and forth thing, like who tried the most. And sure, you have expectations of what you think somebody should do or should have done in the course of all of these interactions. But at the end of the day, do they really have the ability to approach and to challenge situations as you do? And usually that's the expectation. Usually that's where the problem comes in. Because we think that this person could have did a little more in this area. This person could have did a little more in that area. But did you ever think for a minute, maybe they couldn't? Maybe they just couldn't. Maybe that's a great part of the problem. That they just couldn't get to that point to be able to do that particular thing that many can do. But it's not all. It's not most who can do. And that's where the rubber meets the road of a sort. That people have to come to their own conclusions as to what their abilities are, but in a lot of cases what they're willing to do. See? Because sometimes people are just not willing. And people are not willing for a variety of reasons. And in most cases, the willingness has nothing to do with you. In most cases, it's a matter of, I've made a decision to enter into this relationship. I've made a decision to accept certain things about this relationship. But there were parts of the relationship that showed up that I really wasn't ready for. I hadn't conceptualized a what-if scenario if this came up. I didn't know what I had actually committed to. I mean, I knew, I said yes, I went along, but I really didn't have a full understanding of what this was going to really look like. It's like shadow boxing. You can shadow box, right, for months, right, and preparation for a fight, like to fight Mike Tyson, for instance. Now, you didn't see Mike knock everybody out that he had fought. But you said it's not going to be that way for you. Right? So you shadow boxing, and then fight day comes. You go and you get into the ring with Mike. One of the things that you didn't experience was how hard Mike hits. Right? That you couldn't figure that one out. You couldn't grasp that one. So when Mike hit you, it's like you felt everything within your future get shook. And then you realize the fight that you were really in. And it changed the whole course of everything. Well, that's how life really is. That's how life really is. You're in a relationship with somebody, and the things that attracted you to that person are the things that you're riding on for a while. The things that you wanted to get from that person are some of the things that you ride on for a while. You ride on that. You ride on the idea. of that relationship. You ride on the fantasy that you created about that relationship, right? You ride on that. And that's where that honeymoon period is for you. Because you start putting things together. You start putting bits and pieces together of how you want this relationship to blossom now. Because now what you're doing is you're attempting to groom the relationship. Forgetting about the fact that the other person is probably doing the same exact thing. The same exact thing. They're probably doing the same exact thing that you're doing. They're grooming the relationship. They're trying to get the relationship to a place of comfort, right? Where they can just kind of settle in. But it doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't. And while you're planning, the other person is planning, and this goes on for about that first year of the relationship. And then all of a sudden, poof, here come the problems. Like, well, where'd that come from? How do we get there? Because during the course of that honeymoon period, you weren't having dialogue that was necessary for the growth and development of that relationship. The relationship wasn't growing. Y'all were just riding on the high of being involved. That's all you were doing. You're riding on that high. Just like any other high. It's always the first one. It's always that first hit. It's always the first snort, the first puff, the first drink, the first shot. It's always the first one that you chase. It's the same way with the relationship. That first interaction that connects with the fantasy that you created about that person. That's it. And that's all that happens throughout that first year. Right? You imagine what it would be like kissing that person. And the kiss happens. And you're high on that. You're high on that. And you're still chasing that. Right? You have sex. You're high on that. Y'all go out. You imagine yourself, sitting in this fine restaurant, eating steak and potatoes and all this kind of stuff. You're high on that. So you're getting high that first year. That's what you're actually doing. Those endorphins within inside of you, those hormones, everything is just raging out of control. And it lasts for a while. But what you keep doing is you keep getting that fix and the next fix and the next fix and the next fix. That fantasy-driven thinking, right? That conditioning that keeps moving you towards that person. And then after that first year, right? It don't always be a whole full year. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. But once you stop feeling that, right? You're already in it. You've developed some feelings. You legitimately care. You love this person. You love this person. But things aren't working out. Things are just not working out. This is difficult. Things, we're having a real hard time. We're struggling through things today. Things aren't as easy as they used to be between us. Because now reality shows up and we realize where we are. We're with another person. We're with another person. We forget sometimes that other person has hopes, dreams, aspirations, thoughts, feelings, their own baggage that comes into the relationship. We don't want them to bring that stuff. We want people to come into a relationship with us empty-handed. Don't come with any stuff. Right? We all come with stuff. And if you don't think you come with stuff, then that's another part of the problem. Because you think you don't have any issues. We all have issues. You just got to figure out what they are. You just got to figure out what they are. You just got to figure out if there's a need for you to address these things. That's what you really have to figure out. Because once you know some things are going on with you, you can be in denial as much as you want to, right, about the prevalence of these issues in relationships. As long as you can focus on another person and blame another person, you will never take responsibility for your conditioning and your role in the demise of this relationship. It's going to always be that kind of a mindset. So when you love a person and you lock on to the fact that I love you and I'm doing everything and I have done everything that I possibly can to save this relationship, right? Then some other realities have to be faced. Some other realities have to be faced. And it's not an easy thing to do at all. So there's an article, y'all know that, it's always an article, on Psychology Today, right? 5 ways to move on when you still love your ex. Now, this is titled When You Still Love Your Ex, right? But I want you to also bear in mind the current relationship you're in, because it's relevant to that as well. Because you can still be with the person and they have already become an ex, because you have moved on in other areas of that relationship. Just like with an ex. The ex is no longer living there. You're not doing certain things with them, right, as you used to. So you physically move on, but then there's a spiritual and mental moving on that happens as well from any relationship. But the title of the article is 5 Ways to Move On When You Still Love Your Ex. Why we have to let go of the fantasy. And I talked about that when this started off, that like when we get locked into, you know, taking a relationship where we want it to go, where we think it should go, and it doesn't go there, it's devastating. It's traumatic even for some. So, to the article. Nothing can keep you from a happier future than a lingering relationship wound. We've all been there. Experiencing good love going bad is painful. It doesn't really matter what the circumstances were, or who was right, or who was wrong. The bottom line is that it hurts, and that the pain is preventing you from moving forward. While time is the best healer, there are 5 concrete steps you can take that will facilitate the process. And it's real important to understand, it says in here that it doesn't really matter what your circumstances were, who was right and who was wrong. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And that's something else that we tend to ride on too. Who was wrong, who was right, so on and so forth, all those things. You know, it's one thing to have a discussion about things that transpired, but when you look at the entire picture, honestly, and this is really important, when you honestly looked at the entire picture, did you have a role in this? It's not about who was right and who was wrong. This is a matter of, did you have a role? And if you had a role, cop to it. And this is big for me, right? You know, when I've had relationships in the past, and I can tell you, there wasn't hatred and animosity, you know, in it that I couldn't have a discussion about what transpired. There were things that transpired, yeah. But my issue has always been, if you look at yourself, and I'm talking to the other person, you ask yourself, should you have entered into this relationship with me? Was it just about sex with me? Was it about marriage? Was it about a future? If it was about those things, then what did you conceptualize about this thing that we had? And where did it go wrong? Not because of me, but for you. Where did it go wrong for you? See, you got to talk about where it went wrong for you. Not where I did you wrong, or where you did me wrong. Where did it go wrong for you? Without blaming the other person. Because once your fantasy ended, you had to know that reality was going to show up. And every new relationship, its foundation is established on fantasy. It's not founded on reality, because you don't know about that person. You really don't know this person. You don't come to know a person until time. You think you know a person. They act out on some behavior. You say, oh, I know you. No, you don't know me. You don't know me. So it's important to understand that who's right and who's wrong is not the focus. Who's wrong? Who's wrong? Right? What was my wrong? What was your wrong? Who's wrong? Led to this. Because it happens on both parts. Sometimes one continues to fight while the other just throws the towel in. Sometimes both continue to fight, but they're fighting each other because they haven't locked into the reality of why they're fighting. So number one on this list, right? And we're talking about, while time is the best healer, there are 5 concrete steps that you can take to facilitate the process of moving forward. Number one, and again, I need to remind y'all that I don't really read into these articles when I'm selecting an article to bring to the show. I'll peruse it based on the thought that I have for the particular topic. Right? So, cut off contact is number one on that list. To the article. Cut off contact, number one. Do this at least for a little while. No, you do not need to be friends. Keeping an ex in your life is not by itself a sign of maturity. Knowing how to take care of yourself and your emotional well-being is. Many people hang on to the idea of friendship with an ex as a way to keep the possibility of the relationship alive, because the idea of completely letting go seems too overwhelming. While, depending on the circumstances, a friendship may eventually be possible, being friends can't happen in a genuine way until you have healed through most, if not all, of the pain, which takes time. Being your own best friend is what is most important during a difficult breakup, and that means not putting yourself in situations that don't lead to feeling good. When you are hurting, you are vulnerable. Protecting yourself with healthy boundaries is an essential part of good self-care. Politely let your ex know you need your space and will prefer not to be in contact for the time being. Right? It parenthesizes, don't ghost them, like just don't fall off the planet. You know. But I want to go back to something that is said here. Many people hang on to the idea of friendship with an ex as a way to keep the possibility of the relationship alive, because the idea of completely letting go seems too overwhelming. Just think about that for a minute, right? You know, and this is a big issue in a lot of relationships today. In a lot of relationships today, people break up and they continue to maintain contact with one another. I remember, like, when I was seeing someone who I eventually married, and when I was seeing them, right, they had still maintained intermittent, regardless of the frequency, intermittent contact, right? And it was usually, according to her, and I'm a believer, that's what she told me, that he would intermittently call her, right, throughout, you know, period of years. So sometimes she might not hear from him for a year. Sometimes she might hear from him on holiday, so on and so forth. So one day we were home together, phone rang, she answered it, and it was him. So I'm just laying in the bed and I'm just listening. It was a general conversation, and it was just something about the way that she was talking. It wasn't she was trying to, like, conceal anything, but it was like there was a level of discomfort with this conversation. And so I was like, well, who's that? And she told me who it was. So I said, well, I knew the name. Like, so, what does he want? What is he calling for? Oh, well, you know, she had told him to hold on. I said, oh. That needs to come to an end. Period. There are a lot of people, men and women alike, who think it's okay to have an ex as a friend. No, it's not. And it really isn't okay if you're with someone. If you make the decision when you're single to maintain a relationship with an ex, right? That's one thing. When you enter into a relationship with someone who you're steady with, you cut that off. You cut that off. Period. That has nothing to do with control. It has nothing to do with feeling secure in a relationship. It has nothing to do with any of that. That is an ex. The article says it right here. Many people hang on to the idea of a friendship with an ex as a way to keep the possibility of the relationship alive. That's all you're doing. You can sit down and say anything you want all day long, right? It's an opportunity that continues to exist. When that moment of vulnerability comes, what's going on? Hey, it's your friend. You know how we used to ride. You know how I used to hit that thing. I can make you feel good. And you go all in. Next thing you know, you're right back. You can sit down and say all day long, no, I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't, what we haven't, and nah, he done. Okay. The article says it right here. It's been my experience. Period. It's been my experience. Right? If it was good between the two of you, right, regardless of how it ended, y'all moved past it, you worked through those things that caused it to end, and you moved on to other relationships, that's fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, you need to move on past that. No conversation, ain't nothing to talk about. It says in the article that maybe after you heal that you can, you know, y'all can be cool. Y'all don't have to be, you know, hating one another. But, you know, the relationship part you have to look at, right? If I still got your number and I want to send you a Happy New Year, I may do that. But in most cases, I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I'm not trying to keep anything alive. I'm trying to kill it. I'm done. So going back to the article, if you must remain in contact because of children or other shared obligations, know that there's a distinct difference between being friendly and being friends. And that's what I was just talking about. True friendship means two people care about each other's well-being and have one another's best interests at heart. By the time many relationships end, it is often in question whether both parties can genuinely provide this kind of care and support for one another. The expectation that someone who didn't treat you well while you were together will be capable of being a true friend afterwards sets you up to continue being hurt. But choosing to be friendly means you can, without expectations, acknowledge the love you shared, and honor that time in your life by treating the other person with kindness and respect. And this is, you know, this is really important to understand, because I was just alluding to that a moment ago. You know, you have to look at, right? If we're together in a relationship, right? You're supposed to be my friend. There are a lot of relationships, I can tell you, where people are just not friends. They're just not. They're just not. I've been in those kinds of relationships. And if you're going to sit there and say that you've never been, or you're not, you just look at it for real. Friendship is about you genuinely caring about me and my well-being. About me and my well-being. Do you know what that means? You have to look at your idea of friendship. You have to look at your circle of people. How many of those people in your circle that you call friends are really friends? If it's street terminology, friends, it's a whole different ballgame. Because street life brings a whole different crew of friends. We about it. We about that life. But when it goes down, being about that life, you're on your own, man. I ain't taking that L for you. Right? Oh, what? Right? When you look at friendship, you have to define friendship, because anyone who you're in a relationship with, you have to have a friendship with them. You have to legitimately care. And again, here lies another problem. Because we haven't established friendship in many cases. In many cases, we've established sex-ship. You're hitting it right. That's good. That works. That's why the makeup, right, after an argument is so wonderful. Because it allows you to get high. It does. It allows your hormones, right? All those endorphins, right, to get the flowing. And that's the feeling that we all want. We all want that feeling. That's part of the human being's makeup, to feel good all the time. Period. Always. We always want to feel good. We always want things to be great. So when you look at people talk about the best sex is makeup sex, ask yourself why. Because what happens is, if the best sex for you is makeup sex, then what you do is you live a life of high conflict. High conflict. It's a high conflict relationship because you seek pleasure from your partner on the tail end of the conflict. That's great sex, man. And I hear people say that all the time. And it's not the sex, it's the guilt. It's the freedom. That's what that is. But that's a whole nother show. Kind of got off track for a minute. But it just talks about here where if you two were friends through the course of all of this, right, then there would have been genuine concern for your well-being, right? Therefore, we would have talked about things, we would have worked through things, we would have been honest with one another, because that's what friendship should look like. Therefore, it was a better chance for the relationship to last, because as friends, see, we're friends, lovers, right? And we get stuck on lovers. Therefore, we lose sight of, and then when it's time to fix it and you wonder why the person like feels so much disdain for you, that's why. Because I go all in. That's who I am. I go all in, man. I fall hard. I fall hard in love. I fall hard out of it. Right? Because I value this relationship. Especially when you talk about marriage. I value marriage. I may have done some dumb things throughout the years of the 4 marriages that I've had. Right? But I value marriage. I fight for my marriage. I mean, I fight. Tooth and nail. Yeah. Absolutely. I fight hard. Because I know that I need you. I know that I need you. I haven't fully determined all of the needs. But I know I need you. Right? But it says here at the end, right? But choosing to be friendly means you can, without expectations, acknowledge the love you once shared and honor that time, right? And by treating a person with respect and kindness. There was a time, and I always tell people, you know, stop focusing on all the negative things about your relationship. Stop focusing on how the relationship ended. You know why? Because that's a human being. They need to be free from, you know, the resentment, the guilt, and all that stuff at some point in time. And when they get there, they need to also know that, listen, we had a good relationship. You know, it was good. At one point in time, it was good. Something happened, and whatever it was that happened, you know, it can't be changed. And you can't change the love that you once had either. You can't change that. Number 2 of that list. let go of the fantasy. And for anyone who may have just tuned in, we're talking about 5 ways to move on when you still love your ex. And again, what I stated early on was that it's talking about when you, with your ex. But I also want people to be reminded that some of us are in relationships that have been over with from the beginning. And we have never fully committed into the relationship. And we've allowed everything outside the relationship and inside of ourselves to cause it to continue to go in the direction that it's going in. So it's almost treating it like it's your ex already, because you haven't developed a friendship, because you haven't developed any compromise, because you haven't moved past the fantasy stage. And so here we go, number 2 on the list, let go of the fantasy. To the article. Many people don't realize that a large majority of the pain they experienced during a breakup has nothing to do with the relationship they really had. Relationships always end for a reason. It is rarely a complete surprise because things generally haven't been going well for a while. Wasn't I just talking about that? There's often a long list of what each person did or didn't do that led to all the fighting and hurt feelings. Not the end of the relationship. It led to all the fighting and hurt feelings. Most people don't want back the relationship they actually had. Most people don't want back the relationship they actually had. What they mourn for is the relationship they thought they could have if things had just been different. But the truth is, that relationship didn't exist. Letting go of a dream can be painful. When the relationship first started, there were expectations set for what it could be, based on the good things that seemed to be unfolding at the time. Almost all relationships are great in the beginning. Otherwise, they would have never started. But the whole of a relationship is what it was from beginning to end. Listen, folks, I don't profess to know everything. And again, I didn't read this article. I look for a title, I type in my thought, I look for an article, find the article. I have some preferred sites. Psychology Today happens to be one of them. I just got finished telling you this. People, we do it all the time. All the time. We do it all the time, man. We enter into relationships and we just go. In here, we just go. We're somewhere else. And that person is clueless as to where we have gone. Like here we are, having sex. Right? I'm on top of you, getting it in. Right? Well, literally getting it in. Right? And you're enjoying the moment. But the fantasy is coming true. And you don't realize how you get lost. You get lost in all of that. Because the better you feel in that moment, the more the fantasy becomes more and more prevalent to you. And you never, ever, ever get away from that. That's why the devastation comes. The devastation is not because the other person failed you. The devastation comes because your expectation, your fantasy-driven expectation failed you. That's what failed you. It wasn't me. It wasn't her. It was the expectation driven by a fantasy of what you think things could be. That's where the problem comes in. I want you to think about that for a minute, because it's really important to understand that a relationship don't get real until you make it real. It doesn't. I can tell you how many times I've been in relationships where I tell the person, you don't know me. You really don't. We've spent too much time, right, arguing and fighting over conditions over expectations. We never get a chance. We've never gotten a chance to connect with one another because it was always about expectations, fantasy-driven expectations that we're always in battling with. For me, and I say this for me, my responsibility has always been focused on marriage. One way or another, right? And that's not in all cases. I'm not telling you that there's not instances where I've been sexually involved with the person, right? And there's no intention on marriage. I'm not telling you that. I'm saying that when I come upon that person, right, who is interested in having a long-term relationship, my switch goes to, this is about obligation and responsible living, right? Based on my divine precepts, my teachings through Islam. Whatever you practice, it doesn't matter. But that's when my switch goes into another mode. So now it goes into responsibility. I'm responsible for you. I'm responsible to you. We're one another's garments, right? There's a responsibility I have. So I learn you. But sometimes what happens is, in me learning you, you're not learning me, but I'm learning you and I'm doing what I have to do to improve that, to make sure I'm in tune with you. Everybody doesn't do that. It talks about here in the article, it is rarely a complete surprise because things generally haven't been going well for a while. When you find yourself being the main one, always doing, you are draining yourself because you have to give yourself some too. Yeah, you don't lose individualism in a relationship. And a lot of times we do. I know I've done it. I've lost my own individualism in relationships. But not because of them, but because of me. Because of me wanting to be the codependent one, the caretaker, the white knight, because of me. Right? So you already see it. You already feel it. You already feel the drain. It's like a Chinese water torture. Y'all know what that? Well, Chinese water torture is like just putting a bucket over somebody's head and poking a hole in the bucket and tying the person to that chair, and it's just a drip, the drip, the drip, the drip, and it's a slow drip, right? And it just feels, and after a while it starts sounding like a sledgehammer inside of your brain, right? Well, that's what happens. And that's why it becomes so painful. That's why it becomes so painful, because your reality that your fantasy is no longer like going to come to fruition is devastating. And then you're looking at the other person and you're blaming them and you're holding them like responsible for your pain when it's your own pain. It's your self-imposed pain. Back to the article. Because our mind is trying to heal our heart, because our mind is trying to heal our heart, right? And that's a connection that you have to make. The mind is trying to heal the hurt, the heart. The painful memories often get shifted to the background and we find ourselves remembering and longing for the good times. Here comes the trap. We forget who the person really was and idealize who we wanted them to be. A good strategy for getting past these moments is to simply write down every painful thing you can remember happening during the relationship and read it over to yourself while making the effort to vividly recall those memories until the painful feelings subside. The point here isn't to stay angry, but to remember the full truth of why the relationship ended. And I was just talking about that early on. Eventually, letting go of these events will be, excuse me, an important part of the forgiveness and healing process. But in order to let go of something, you must first acknowledge and accept that it happened. Listen, so let me go back to that for a minute. The point here isn't to stay angry, but to remember the full truth of why the relationship ended. This is important. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're looking for the full truth of why the relationship ended, that means onus of your role. That means onus of your role. See, because if you can't be honest with me, if you can't be honest with me about your role, if you're still blaming me, and you're not looking at this was in fact your role, this was your doing, this was your dismantling. This was your dismantling. And it's on both sides. We both have to take that position. You know, sometimes we just shouldn't have never even got married. Might have to be your position. We saw the red flags. We saw all the signs. We turned a blind eye to all of them. Sometimes that's onus enough. And not saying anything negatively about that person, but you knew that this wasn't going to last long. You knew it. But then you start looking at the other side where, okay, well, listen, but these were your challenges before me. You've heard this before in other relationships. You knew this existed. You knew this about yourself. But you couldn't disclose it to me. It goes back to friendship. If we had a friendship, right, I would have known those things. You would have told me those things. You would have told me those are your challenges, those are your struggles. What are you waiting for? I never understood the concept of people delaying telling their partner certain things, waiting until you get to a certain point in a relationship, whatever that damn point is, and then you want to tell people things. And then you think that they should just, suck it up. Because then when they don't suck it up, then you say to them, oh, well, when you did such and such, or when you told me such and such, I did. That's all you're doing. That's not friendship, folks. That's not friendship. That's why your relationships continue to go in the direction they go in. I'm an open book. Anybody I meet, I tell you right from the door whatever you want to know about me. And you don't have to ask. I'll tell you who I am. Because I need you to know who I am. I'll let you know things. I'm not going to not respond to things. Well, that's not entirely true because I take a lot of things on the chin, right? Because I don't feel that there's a need to speak to and address everything, right? Because everything doesn't necessarily affect us. Some things just affect me, and that's my stuff, and I have to address my stuff, right? So along the way, I have to kind of find the balance and, okay, wait a minute, is this mine or is this yours? And you'll find a lot of times, a lot of stuff is just yours, mine. So so I take a lot of things on the chin, right? In hopes of you recognize that wounded look in my eyes and not repeat it. But if you continue to repeat it, I'm going to say something about it. I've gotten better with that I'll say something about it now. And people, can interpret that as being bitter or aggressive simply because you're saying something, and they'll defer it to a previous relationship and tell you, well, I'm not them. I mean, I've done it too, but I know that your treatment of me is based on your condition. Therefore, you're going to treat me as you have treated others before me. And then I have to remind you that I done already shook off the boy, so I don't need that kind of treatment. Those kind of things that happen. But again, it's about remembering the full truth of why the relationship ended, right? And a lot of times this is also where guilt becomes revealed. Guilt becomes revealed because you begin to see, damn, I really could have done something different. I really should have done something different. But how do you approach that? And not only how do you approach that, how does the recipient receive it? How do they internalize it? Because if you're still in love with one another, but you see all of this damage that has been done, right? First of all, you got to approach it honestly. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. Okay, so you are looking at things from a truthful perspective now. Excuse me. You're looking at things from a truthful perspective now. Now you're coming forth with the truth about why things went the way they were and what it is that you're intending to do about changing it. Right? Again, because you got to make sure, man. And remember, I did the show about a month or so ago on like those 6 questions that you need to ask before making the decision to end a marriage, right? Or relationship, call it whatever it is you call it. But there were 6 questions that you need to ask yourself. And 6 questions you needed to ask yourselves. And not only did I find the article of interest, I used the article. Yeah. I used it. So I'm saying to you that if a person is being truthful, right? That's one thing. It doesn't mean because I come to you and be truthful, now that the relationship is going to get back on track. Because again, if you're still in fantasy mode, it's not going to make a difference. So you have to move past the fantasy. But right now, we're just talking about 5 ways to move on when you still love somebody. So you can still move on. You can still move on. And up in I think number 2, it talked about how at some point in time, if you choose to, you can you can establish a friendship. And sometimes it happens. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Sometimes, when you move past certain things, you come to to grips with your own truth, and you become apologetic, within yourself, and deal with that with the other person. It's a possibility. Because there's always, I think I'm going into, I just saw the sentence. So yeah, it's always a possibility. Only God knows. Only God knows. But if you're not being truthful within yourself about how it ended, right? Like looking at everything that happened, it's not going to matter. Number 3 on that list. The list of 5 ways to move on when you still love your ex. And again, ex is somebody you can currently be with right now. Number 3 is make peace with the past. When someone treats you poorly or does something hurtful, it is a natural and healthy response to feel some anger. Let me say that again, because some people lose sight of this. When someone treats you poorly or does something hurtful, it is a natural and healthy response to feel some anger. Anger helps you be aware of situations that are not in your best interest, and can facilitate the separation process from an unhealthy relationship. But when we hold on to anger and resentment from past experiences, we take them with us into the future. Nothing hurts more than when someone you love does something that causes you to reevaluate why you believed in them. Nothing hurts more than when someone you love does something that causes you to reevaluate who you believe them to be. Now, I went somewhere else with that one, sorry. When someone betrays the trust you gave, it is painful. But letting what someone else did limit your ability to move forward means they still exert control over your life. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone else off the hook for his or her behalf. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone else off the hook for his or her bad behavior. It's about your emotional freedom. So let me go back for a minute. Right? Because this is another issue, and I faced this myself. When someone treats you poorly or does something hurtful, let's stop there for a minute. Right? When someone treats you poorly or does something hurtful, right? It's real important to see that. This is another one of those truths that the other person, right, the bearer, the facilitator of that bad behavior upon you has to look at. This is the truth that you have to look at. Because if I'm saying to you that your behavior toward me was poor, how you treated me was poor, how you treated me was hurtful, right? You have to deal with that. Whether you want to deal with it now, whether you want to deal with it later, Whether you want to continue to avoid it, because you can continue to avoid a thing and it still resides within you and you're going to feel it anyway. Because when you know, but yet deny it to the other person, you got to carry that thing, man. See, there's no escaping you. That's the thing. You can run all over the place. But when you look behind you, you don't see nothing there. You think you're past it, but it's you. It's in you. Everywhere you go, you take you with you. It resides within you. So what you fail to do, what you fail to be dishonest about, still stays with you. So you have to come to grips with what you did that was hurtful. You have to come to grips with how poorly you did treat that other person. You got to come to grips with that. If you don't, you're going to drag it into the next relationship anyway. And you're going to keep on being in denial about it. You're going to keep on saying it wasn't your fault. You're going to keep on saying it wasn't you. Because you don't want to deal with yourself. It is a natural and healthy response to feel some anger. It's natural. So for us to argue because I'm telling you that you're treating me poorly, there's nothing unnatural about that. But you find it so appalling that I'm angry. You're so offended that I'm angry. You use that as an excuse to justify, right, your conduct, your bad behavior. You validated your own bad behavior because now you want to tell me that my anger is like unrealistic. Or because I'm argumentative now about your behavior towards me, now you want to make that the reason for why we can't talk. Instead of looking at the naturalness, the healthiness, the truthfulness of the circumstance. You rather call it something else because that's more comfortable for you. Or you didn't have to react like that. How can you tell me how to react from the hurt and the poorly and the bad behavior that you put upon? How can you sit there and tell me that? But we do that to people. We do that to people. Oh, it wasn't that deep. How do you know? Because you intellectualize your response because you're not feeling it. You didn't experience it. So you just intellectualize your response and say what you think it is. That's part of the problem in a relationship. That's part of the problem. You intellectualizing, your way out of everything. Instead of dealing with it, right? Wait a minute, didn't you just say that though? Yeah, I said it, but I didn't say it like that. That's the way you took it. Okay. You want to know why I took it that way? No, not really. That's typically the response, not in those words. But that's typically the response. You don't care. Because you got to validate your conduct. Anger helps you be aware of situations that are not in your best interest and can facilitate the separation process from an unhealthy relationship. And remember, I did a couple of shows on unhealthy relationships, right? Sometimes this is needed. That's why God gave us that emotion. It's a natural response to things that are hurtful. Because we need to know when to get away. We need to know when to get away. We naturally have a fight or flight within us. And sometimes we'll stay and fight. Anger causes us to realize you need to flight. You need to take flight. You need to roll out. We have to experience it, man. We have to experience it. Just think if you didn't experience anger, what kind of situations you would be in. People say, oh, well, if we didn't have anger, we probably would have more successful. No, you wouldn't. You still have free will. You're still going to make a decision. You may not get angry, but you'll experience some other emotion that says, listen, you got to go. It's an instinct. Fight or flight is an instinct. So you can feel it in your gut, you got to go. Anger may keep so many violent things from happening, right? But at the end of the day, it's a facilitator. Like, hello, you got to go, right? It also says that when we hold on to anger and resentment from past experiences, we take them with us into the future. And this is where bitterness comes in. A lot of people become bitter because a relationship failed, right? And they carry that bitterness into every interaction they have with anybody. Nobody even has a chance. You don't even have a chance. And it's the difference between being bitter, acting through bitterness, and then just speaking up. There's a difference. And some people take speaking up as a form of bitterness from previous experiences. No, I'm just not, my tolerance level for certain things have just changed, right? I'm just not accepting of certain things anymore. So I'm going to challenge you on it. I'm going to say something to you about it, right? You're just not going to talk to me any kind of way. I'm definitely going to say something to you if you're talking to me in a manner that I find to be, disrespectful, condescending. You don't need to. Remember, it goes back to friendship again. Why would you talk to your friend in that manner? Right? People call it tough love. No, it's bullshit. That's what it is. It's your arrogance. You don't have to talk to people in any condescending or negative manner or degrading manner to get a point across. You can just say the words. Period. It also says here, nothing hurts more than when someone you love does something that causes you to reevaluate who you believe them to be. Like, wow, you did that? You mean after all I've done, you took that one little thing? Well, it wasn't necessarily little, but you took that one thing and ran with it out of all the 99 other things I did that were good. You took one thing, so you attempted to perfect me. And because I wasn't perfect, because I didn't score 100 across the board, I scored one off the mark, and you're acting like this? Again, it goes back to, wow, let me reevaluate this relationship. Because here, I'm not looking for perfection in you. I'm looking for respect. Right? I'm looking for empathy, sympathy, nurturing. I'm looking for those things from you. I'm not looking for perfection. But here you're looking for perfection. So I do one thing wrong. Well, one thing that you perceive as being wrong. One thing you're in disagreement with. I didn't agree with you on something. And you internalize it like that. Yeah, I'm looking like, wow, like, really? And like, but damn, I didn't look out for you. I didn't took care of you. I didn't did this for you, that for you. And that's how you're reacting? Wow. It gets deep, man. It really does. It gets deep. And I've experienced it. I've experienced it, man. Well, like I said, I go all in. I go all in. Nothing perfect about me. So why do you expect perfection? You're not even perfect. So that speaks volumes about why this relationship was even established. Because it goes back to the fantasy that you're trying to keep alive. And because your fantasy was broke up, because you woke up to the reality of what you had done, now you don't know what to do, so you beat up on me.